Welcome, online community. It's R. Christian Minson here, your host of Facebook Live every week here, just starting back up after a long hiatus. I am here in the capacity of certified transformational breath facilitator, trainer, breathwork trainer for the last 15 years, former monk, which is kind of what we're going to talk about today, a coach, and basically your guide for moving you to a higher version of yourself. So welcome today. Today we have the topic Musings of a former monk. I was a monk for 10 years of my life, and that was over 10 years ago. This is relevant now because just around this time, it was actually 2 days ago, September 15th, was my anniversary of leaving the monastic order. And that, of course, was a very pivotal time in my life. And since then, I took up breath work and have been on the road and traveling pretty much for these last 15 years, doing breath work around the world. And as I was mentioning in the beginning, for people who just joined on, before the official opening of this Facebook Live, I was letting people know that I was just recently in Dubai, and I was there after quarantine opened up a little bit. The borders finally opened up. I took a flight out there. I was planning to stay a month, and I ended up staying 2 months because I just got started doing breathwork and breathwork sessions there, and it was so popular and so needed that people just kept coming out of the woodwork asking for sessions. So I stayed on a whole another month. So here I am now back in the United States of America. Currently I'm back in Colorado and planning to get out to San Diego sometime soon. And here, one of the things that I didn't do, I thought I was just going to be gone for a month, so I thought I'd take a little time off from my Facebook Lives. And I took that time off, but it ended up being 2 months off. So I'm eager to get back into this, eager to reestablish our relationship here. And so on that note, as we're talking today, this is a topic that really is best expressed by your questions. You are you are free to ask questions, anything you want about what went on in my life as a monk, what the routine was, anything like that. I know when I was thinking about it, really. And so when you do that, just type it into the chat bar, and we will try to answer those questions as best we can. When I was thinking about this topic, I was thinking, why is it so relevant for this time? And one big reason came up. And I'd say there's really two types of people, very generalizing things right now, two types of people in this world right now: those that have faith in a higher power, and those that don't subscribe to some kind of higher power being, looking over things. And why this is relevant is because I believe what I've seen, those that don't have this faith tend to be, and again, this is a generalization, but by and large, there's people who don't see the possibility of something guiding and steering the ship, are a little bit more anxious, frustrated, concerned, scared, not sure what's going on in the world today and in the world in general, but especially today with all this craziness. And therefore, they're a bit more stressed, a bit more fearful, and life's a bit more taxing. Whereas those who have a strong foundation of faith that there is some greater force, some greater power, some call it God, some call it the universal energy, some, like myself, I feel it's just this vibration of love, which is the essence of everything, is sort of here guiding and steering this. So what's going on, this corona situation and all the turbulence in the world, is really just a temporary blip in the map of us moving towards a greater understanding of who we are, a greater rekindling of our relationship with our higher self and with this power. And those that have this sense of this higher power tend to be a little bit more calm, a little bit more let's wait and see, a little bit more reserved and less stressed out about this whole situation that's going on. And why does that matter? Because that's really how we live day to day. Every day do you wake up with a sense of fear and foreboding? What's going to happen? Is the sky going to fall today? Or do you wake up with a sense of, here I am, it's another day. Let's, give gratitude for what I have to be thankful for and see what I can do to improve my situation. So on that, let's just see, let's just open it up right now. A question, Ren. Hello, Ren. What led you to your decision to leave the monastic life? And that is one of the most common questions I get. Three of the most common questions. One is, why did you go in the first place? The second is, did you have to cut your hair in this crazy reverse bowl haircut and wear basically a potato sack? And the answer to that is no. And then the third is, what made you leave? So what did make me leave? This was, first to understand why I went in the first place. It was a very long trajectory of life, the life of a romantic idealist myself. I feel like I was always looking for the nature of reality. I always felt somehow that what was being presented to me and presented to us was not really the full story and not really the full truth. And I really wanted to know, what was the meaning, what was the purpose behind life? And the fast version of the story is it led me to the teachings of a spiritual master, Paramahansa Yogananda, which his photo is right back here. Paramahansa Yogananda, an Indian master who came to the West in 1920 and then disseminated Eastern teachings. In fact, today, if you have heard of yoga, if you ever went namaste, if you've ever worn a t-shirt or seen the Ganesh symbol, the elephant god, all of this basically is part of modern Western culture because large part Yogananda bringing Eastern philosophy and Eastern culture to the West way back in 1920. In fact, celebrating 100 years now of his arrival first in America back in 1920. So I got into those teachings, and in that, there was really the answers. The answer in a nutshell was that the purpose of life is our own self-evolution, our evolution towards our own self-realization, realization of who we are as our higher self, as that greater self that is in full alignment with the higher power, God, or the universal energy. And then to attain that realization for ourselves, and then to help others to attain that for ourselves. So this is the foundation that I really clung to, and which led me to monastic life, and which has been the foundation of everything that I do and teach here forth, is that we are basically on a journey of returning to wholeness, returning to who we are as deep spiritual individuals, pieces of, if you will, of that grander universal power. And as such, we're descendants of that universal power. We're like the princes and princesses of the king or queen, if you will, of the universe. And as such, we're imbued and endowed with all the power that the king possesses. And this is our quest in life, is to become, is to remember, and to be able to reuse all of this power. So that led me into monastic life, because that was really a lifestyle then that was dedicated to this pursuit, a lifestyle that allowed us to really spend significant amount of time. It was the whole purpose of this lifestyle to create that self-realization and come back to that place of understanding who we truly are. So fast forward 10 years then, and it's like, why did I leave? And so what happened in that 10 years? A lot of things happened. But one of the most significant things is that I really got to live day in and day out a lifestyle dedicated to this highest pursuit of self-realization and self-actualization. And in that, I feel like I really got a good understanding. And one of the biggest understandings was that this is a lifestyle that can be transported into any facet of life, meaning it wasn't just unique to monastic life, though monastic life was ideally suited and created a container for us to really dive deep into this lifestyle. But the elements of that lifestyle really were the things that we needed to do no matter what our life was, whether we're the president of the United States, whether we're a janitor sweeping the floors, whether we're CEO of a company or a worker in a factory, or a white collar worker somewhere in some Fortune 500 company. No matter what our role was in life, that these principles or these lifestyle elements were applicable anywhere. And so part of my the next step in my journey was really to take what I'd learned and to go back out into the world and apply these things to actually prove that I could do this not only inside the walls, the protecting walls, and they definitely, were walls of protection, keeping out a lot of the distractions of life which happen. But the highest form of living the spiritual life, I believe, it's definitely probably the most difficult anyway, is to take those spiritual principles back out into the world where you have all the distractions, where you have all the extra considerations of having to, feed yourself and your family and pay your rent and fix your car and pay your insurance and all this kind of stuff, to take those principles and continue to live them out in the world. So how this happened, though, was I was a good monk. I felt like I was really in it for life. I was planning to spend my whole life there and such. But what ended up happening one day in meditation, I just got this feeling that it was time to leave. And this wasn't the first time that this had happened. Oftentimes we get these feelings, get restless, you don't want to be there. You double up on your meditation, you double up on your studies and things, and eventually that feeling goes away. But this time that feeling wasn't going away. And no matter what I did, it seemed to keep getting stronger. So it started to get to the point where it started making me a little anxious even. I started to not, I was really was planning to spend my life in this lifestyle, and something inside me kept pushing me to leave. So I employed the help of my counselors there and started to really dive into this. It took about 6 months to really come to a conclusion of what was best for me. But what really helped me at one point was, along that way, I got introduced to breath work. And that is my first introduction. One of my good former monastic friends, too. He's now no longer in the monastic order, but he was a guy that was always exploring new things. And he said, you got to try this breath work. You got to try it out. I think you'd get a lot out of it. And so I did. I tried it out, and I did a session with a little tape, and it was a little funky, but it sparked something in me. So what I did, this is not the first time I've admitted this, but the only thing I did that was a little off as a monk was that I snuck away during one of the times that I was supposed to be on retreat. I went to a breathwork seminar, so a week-long breathwork seminar, where really the breathwork helped me to tune in to my whole emotional field. And this was something that I've been struggling with all my life, and has been one of my main focuses, is to develop more of a relationship to my emotional self and my emotional body. And in fact, I've got a course coming out soon, a 21-day emotional mastery challenge. Be on the lookout for that. But that's an aside here. Back to the story. The breath work really helped me in 3 ways with my emotions. First of all, it helped me to start to understand that I had emotions. That may sound weird, but this energy running through me for somebody who had suppressed their emotions for many years became very, it was a surprise to understand some of these energies as certain emotions. Then the second thing it did was give me a way, to a safe space and container to start expressing these emotions. Something that was fairly new to me, first recognizing them, then like actually expressing this energy. The third thing it did was really help me to integrate all of that old suppressed emotional energy and start clearing the field so that I could then be much more in tune with my intuitive insight. And so what ended up, I was there primarily wondering, what should I do? Should I stay or should I go? And I used the breathwork in a particular way to weigh both of these options. Basically, first I thought, all right, I'm going to stay. And then I was breathing with that option. I'm going to stay in the monastic life. And through that experience, I just kept feeling this constriction, this closure. It didn't feel good. It didn't feel like I was able to move. And then I took the other option. I'm going to leave. And the leaving, even though on paper was scary, I didn't have any place to go. I didn't have a job. I didn't, I didn't know what was next. I hadn't been out in the world in 10 years. And yet, as I breathed on that option, it just kept feeling expansive, kept feeling open, kept feeling right, essentially. And then I, remember the most poignant moment when, my monastic counselor asked me, do you really feel like you should stay or go? And I finally mustered up the courage to say, I feel like I should go. And he said, then you should go. And after making that decision, I had that sense of, people talk about a weight being lifted off your shoulders. This is the first time I ever really felt that. I mean, it literally felt like 50 pounds had just come off me. And I felt light as a feather, went down to the public telephone room, made a few calls to let people know, my family and some friends, that I'd made this decision. And from there, it was just a matter of a month or so wrapping up some loose ends before I was out. So that really led me to the decision to leave. But when I was leaving, I really felt like there were 3 things that I was doing here. One was I was learning one, to face my fears, and my biggest fear was of the unknown and what was going to happen. So this was one of the things that I was doing, venturing out. Part of the fears too that I had entering into the ashram was, the fear of having to support myself out in the world, getting a job, doing all that kind of thing. Fear of relationships. My relationships had been pretty crappy up to that point. And so a lot of these things now I was coming out to face. The second thing was to take personal responsibility for my happiness, which is something that the difference between prior to becoming a monk, I was, I think I was somewhat in victim mode. My life was miserable, and I was blaming any circumstance and anything else until, I saw that it was kind of my choice. My life was my choice, and my happiness was my choice. And so I spent 10 years of cultivating that attitude, and then going back out in the world, it was like, all right, I'm going out to the world, which sometimes is considered the school of hard knocks. And in that world, I have the decision to wake up every morning and say, if things aren't the way I like them, it's my choice to be happy about it or not. It's my choice to make change things if I need to. So that was the second thing. And the third thing, the most powerful thing, was to trust my intuition, to begin to really practice trusting my intuition. And this thing that had come up, which I feel was one of my first big intuitive tests, was, this inner feeling that it was time to go, even though logically staying was probably the more the answer. So I trusted my intuition, and I can honestly say that I've never looked back in any kind of regret or seeming like, oh, why did I leave that? I wish I was there again. Sometimes I wish I was in the nice calmness of the ashram environment when things were kind of chaotic. But then again, what we learned there was to create that calm environment internally. Like the analogy often is, there's a storm on the ocean, right? If you're on the surface of the ocean, those waves can get pretty intense and you can get battered around, and life is pretty chaotic. But dive down just 15 feet below the surface of the water and it's completely calm. You dive into that inner space, and no matter how much of a storm is raging out above and around you, you're interiorized in this capsule of calmness. And this is really what we cultivated over those years, was to go within, primarily with techniques of meditation, but to go within and find that connection to spirit, which is that connection to assurance and that connection to feeling that everything is going to be okay, no matter how chaotic it is around. All right, let's see, Chad just joined on and said, hey, Christian, so good to have you back on Facebook Live. From your time as a monk, what do you now see as the biggest need in our world? I'll tell you this, is not only from the time as a monk, but afterwards as well. I've really formulated what I call my theory of everything, which is basically how everything all works together, which addresses exactly what's the biggest need in our world. So I'll go over this real quick, that God is, or God, the universal one, the essence of all, the oneness, let's put it that way. The oneness was or is. And then the nature of that oneness, I believe, is what I call joy, peace, and love. Joy, peace, love, which I just encapsulate as love. So the nature of our oneness is love. Now the oneness then divided into the many, and here's where duality comes into existence. Our 3D reality, the world and the earth, divided into the many. For what purpose? The purpose was to express its essential nature of love in a myriad of ways. As many different individuals as there are out there, there's that many different ways that love can be uniquely expressed. So as an individual, myself, you, Chad, Ren, any of you out there, our main purpose is to return to the essence of who we are as that one, and the essence of the one is love. So it is to become the essence of love, to express love in everything we do, which would be essentially considered unconditional love, to be in love and to be an expression of love no matter what the circumstances. So I'd say, so to answer the question is really, what do I see as the biggest need in our world, is to learn to live in love, to learn to come back to our essential nature, and then to spend time cultivating our relationship with our essential nature, and then expressing that out in the world. So expressing love. Now, the final points in this theory of everything is that the field with which we realize ourselves as love and that we begin to express it again is the field of relationship. So everything all of our self-evolution and realization happens in the container of relationship. And if you're not in relationship with somebody else, you're in relationship with the primary relationship that we have, which is with yourself. So always within the container of relationship. The number one tool that we have to use in relationship is communication. And then finally, the number one thing that needs to be communicated before any other communication, before any messages can be sent and received adequately, is respect. So essentially, back to what's the biggest need in our world is to get back to our essential nature as love, and then to communicate that love primarily first, foundationally, as respect. And look at how the world is going right now, especially with political factions and things like that. There's just this back and forth bickering, and one just seems to one up the other in rude and nasty things that can get said, and truths and untruths and all this. And why is it keep going back and forth? Because nobody's listening to the other person. And why is that? Because no message can be received until the receiver feels like the sender is respecting them. So until a Democrat gets a sense that a Republican is actually respecting them, can they then start to listen to their points of views, and vice versa. Until a Republican can feel like a Democrat is listening to them, is respecting them, they're not going to be able to hear. They just can't hear, because that respect has to be there before these messages and signals can actually be absorbed and considered. Now, once they're absorbed, once the respect's there, we can start to have an actual civil debate. Now, that means that the points of view still might not agree, but they can be heard and they can be discussed on a civil level. And so I think this is what is really most missing in the world today, and what we need to cultivate. And it comes back to getting in touch with who we are as higher level beings. Why are we having this bickering in the first place? Because we're disconnected from our source. And so there's a fear in that disconnection. You feel alone. You feel by yourself. You feel like you have to do it all yourself, that nobody's there to help, or, that ultimately you have to rely on yourself. And that's a very scary proposition. That's a scary place to be. And, then you're often in fight or flight. And these arguments are the fight aspect of that fight or flight. So, so returning to cultivating this inner connection to a higher consciousness, which is essentially our higher self. So if you don't like to consider it as a separate entity, it really is just you. What I've always said is God is the part of you that you've yet to discover. So you could say, here you are, you know a lot about yourself, but there's still a lot that you've yet to discover. And, as we go through life, we discover new and interesting things. Our definition of ourself continues to expand and expand and expand. That definition keeps growing until we finally encompass the wholeness of who we are. Essentially God. You are God, or God has become you. And so it's up to you to remember the source of your nature. And it's not only up to you, but it's the highest endeavor, and it's the most satisfactory endeavor you'll ever engage on. So on that, let's see, a couple more things came up while we were talking. Thank you for answering, Ren says, my question so well. So as a monk, you developed and raised your soul consciousness. Outside of monastic life, you developed and wanted to raise your emotional body consciousness, intuition. Exactly. So so one of the things I realized was in the monastic life, there's one thing that I consider meditation one of the highest activities that we can perform, as it's an activity that brings us back into relationship with ourselves. But one of the things I realized in all those years is that meditation is actually it is deceptively simple in form so that we all think we can do it, but it really assumes that we have taken care of a lot of our emotional baggage and garbage before really engaging in that meditative endeavor. And what I realized along the way, that I hadn't really taken care of that stuff. That, as I sort of alluded to, working on my emotions has been my lifelong endeavor. I grew up in a military family where emotions were a liability. We stuffed our feelings. It was very difficult to communicate then. I spent a lot of time being moody and miserable. And in fact, through all of that, I hit rock bottom, which is how I discovered the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda, which lifted me out of that misery and gave me some hope and led me to the monastic life. But as much improvement as that monastic life gave to me, and I would never trade that experience for the world. I definitely feel like there was value in every minute. But what didn't occur to me anyway was still a recognition of the emotional backlog that I had, the emotional plug that was in my system, and a need to pop that plug and let these emotions out and start getting into a more healthy relationship with my emotions, which once I did, just boosted my spiritual advancement as well, I personally believe. So, yes, so inside, as Ren was saying, I developed how to raise my soul consciousness. And then as I left monastic life, the pursuit of my personal journey was to sort of kind of go back remedially and work on developing my relationship to my emotions, being better at expressing my emotions, being better at communicating, at relationships, and all that kind of stuff. Again, the field in which this whole self-development happens is within relationship, and communication is the number one tool. And if you can't communicate your feelings, those relationships really tend to go awry. So this is what I'd say, if I could put it in a nutshell. The monastic life was about transcending physical life and making a connection with the higher source. Post-monastic life has been take that connection with the higher source and bring it back into more of an embodied reality. Okay, to say that life, a spiritual life, isn't about foregoing physical existence and ignoring it in pursuit of this higher principle, which I would consider the higher principle our self-realization and the fact that we are energy spirit beings temporarily in these physical cloaks and clothing. But we are in these cloaks and clothing. And, if you think about in life, if you've got a good set of clothes, you want to care for those clothes, right? You don't just, throw them on the street or let the dog chew them up or whatever. You want to take those clothes and be careful with it so you can wear them again and they can look nice. So our bodies are the clothing of our soul, right? And we still have a responsibility to our bodies and to this physical reality. We want to keep this place nice and beautiful, even though there's a recognition that this isn't our true home. Our true home is that higher energetic space, that re-merging with who we are as the soul being or the universal one or God. All right, so thanks for that. Andy is saying, sending positive vibes out to you, Christian, and to all the world. Thank you for being what we need in all this corrupt, damaged universe right now. Thanks. Well, I do my part and recognize that the universe, this corrupt, damaged universe, is just a reflection of ourselves. And this is one of the principles that I had, to talk about anyway, is that, one of the things we learn is that the external world is really just a reflection of our internal world. So when we see corruption, when we see damage, when we see fighting and bickering and disrespect out there, it's because somewhere inside of us, we still haven't resolved these things within ourselves. I mentioned that I went to Dubai in the beginning of this Facebook Live. And in Dubai, I did a lot of breathwork sessions for a lot of high-level people who were CEOs of companies, even a princess of one of the Emirates there, and all. And by and large, what surprised me was that people were still struggling with the same sorts of things that people in common everyday life or less affluent positions of life would be. And this is self-confidence and self-love. And that is the essence of, if we don't, getting back to the theory of everything, our nature is love. And if we don't love ourselves first, that's going to reflect out into the world. And I dare say everything miserable happening in the world is because we as individuals are somewhat off course in our mandate to return to ourselves and express our true nature as love. And as such, we don't love ourselves because we've been disconnected from who we are as ourselves. And in that state, we can be very miserable, and then we project that misery out on everybody else, and it just compounds. So when we say that thank you for being what we need in all this corrupt and damaged universe, what we need is for each of us as individuals to spend some time going back within, remembering who we are, remembering that love is our nature, and remembering that expressing love is our highest endeavor, and to bring that back out into the world. And that doesn't mean just expressing love when everybody around you is loving. That's easy. Even an angry old man can do that, because because love is trumps all. But when things are difficult, when you're with a friend who holds a different political view, or you're in an argument with your significant other, or your boss or somebody else is in contention with you, this is the real place for love to step forward and for you to shift the fabric of reality by not just going on the hamster wheel of feeding back into their discontent, but putting a monkey wrench into the spokes and giving them love and changing the nature of the game. It doesn't just happen overnight, and it's a lot easier said than done, but this, I firmly believe, is really the quest we're on, the path that we have to take, if not to change the world, to at least come to a place where life is a little bit better for us as individuals. So thanks for that, Andy. Well, if anybody else has a question, please type it in. But I want to say one of the mindsets that we had in the monastic life was that we developed this idea that we see everything as a spiritual lesson. And that kind of plays into what I was just saying, because everything is really a lesson for you. And in this sense, that really helped us to transcend victim mentality, because victim mentality is when something happens to you and you're like, oh, that happened to me, like, oh, that person did that to me, or that circumstance was out of my control, and it's just like, so if things had been different, it would be different. And yes, if things were different, it would be different. That's true. But the victim mentality is basically saying, I don't have any power, and I've given that power to everyone else in the situation, or to the external circumstances. Whereas we developed this idea, this sense to see everything as a spiritual lesson that ultimately lands back on you. How can this, what seems to be a negative situation, actually be a positive lesson? How can this, what can this be teaching me? How can this be assisting me in my evolution? And I dare say, I have to say that When this mental shift has taken place, you can see that the things that were most trialsome in your life, the hardest things that you've had to go through, once you get some space from them and look back, they were actually the best times of your life. And why was that? Because they were the times that elicited the most growth and the most self-development. You had to dig deep and pull out your inner power to get through some of these situations. And they were rough going through it. And a lot of things I've gone through, I definitely don't want to go through again. But now, looking back, I can respect those things as really huge steps in my development. Whereas, when life's going great and easy, it's like you plateaued. There's nothing wrong with enjoying life and being in that good space. But I notice unless you really make a lot of effort, or discipline to keep making effort, then you'll tend to stay kind of in the same zone until something shakes you up and causes you to go to the next level. And so that was another principle that we developed in the monastic life was discipline. And that's where I was saying that the discipline to do that duty, to come back to yourself. We primarily were doing it with meditation, study, introspection, service, and physical exercise. These were the 5 things that we would do day in and day out. That it was a discipline. You did it when you were feeling good. When you're feeling bad, you naturally want to do these things to get out of feeling bad. But then when you're feeling good, that's where most people stop. And then it's like, okay, I'm feeling good. I don't need to do this anymore. But no, this is where the discipline kicks in, that you keep doing these activities even while you're feeling good. So you continue to grow even in those times of feeling good. And then, if growth is happening in times when you're feeling good, you don't have to go into those more trialsome times as often to keep your growth happening. And it seems to be that life tends to be more smooth and just more enjoyable. And I dare say even the challenging times actually become enjoyable as you start to shift your perspective in this way. Jerry Hazelton, one of my brothers from the spiritual path that I'm on, when are we going to jam together again? And we had a little spiritual rock and roll group. If you go into my YouTube, you might even find if I still got very raw garage band recordings, but some what I call spiritual rock and roll. Yeah, that's what we do, some chants with a little bit of distorted guitar edge. So we will jam again soon, basically when I'm in San Diego, which may be in the next couple weeks. So look for me. All right. So, there's so much more that I could talk about, but I think unless anybody has any other questions, I think what I'll do is sort of wrap this up and then, want to affirm that I'm back. I'm back on my weekly Facebook Lives, so please join me every week. I think I'm going to try to make these on Wednesday. This is Thursday this time, but if I can get on schedule, just be looking out. It'll be either Wednesday or Thursday next week, and we'll see how it all unfolds. But weekly, I'll be talking about topics relevant to you. If you have any topics you want me to talk about, basically life topics from a spiritual perspective, please send me a message. Like me on Facebook, like me on Instagram, R. Christian Minson. Like my Facebook page, Inhale Life /Breathflow Wellness. Go to my website, breathflow.com, and hang out there. Message me. Get on my contact form. Just let's develop a relationship here, and we'll get into it. We'll get into these deeper topics together. So on that, I say namaste until next time.